Hello, I'm Femi OK. Thank you for watching the stream. May the 3rd is World Press Day, and to mark this special day, when we look at the work that journalists do around the world, we are going to focus in on the challenges of journalists who are trying to cover the Sahel region of Africa. Take a look. What is it like to be a journalist in the Sahel? That is the question that we are asking all of our guests. They will be able to weigh in. If you are watching online, on Twitter, on YouTube, please share your comments as well. With us from Niamey, investigative journalist David Dembele. Joining us to discuss from Washington, D.C., the director of the West Africa Bureau for Reporters Without Borders, Sadibou Marong. And joining us from Dakar, Ousmane Diallo, senior researcher with Amnesty International. Gentlemen, it is really good to have you here. We're talking about the challenges of journalism coming out of the Sahel region, but also how you face those challenges down so the reporting doesn't stop, so we don't have a no-news zone part of Africa. Sadibou, at Reporters Without Borders, you call this area a no-news zone. Why is that?
It's absolutely a no-news zone. When, for example, when you take Mali, which is right now, divided into two parts, the northern part and the southern part. The northern part is quite problematic in terms of access, in terms of developing news, in terms of collecting information, developing it and disseminating it. When we go to the neighboring countries, Burkina Faso, that's the same. We have been touring all those countries, meeting journalists working there. And what they have told us is clear. It's quite difficult for us to go and report independently beyond 80 kilometers, for example, from Ouagadougou. And the 80 kilometers from Ouagadougou is a small city, but it's called Kaya. It's quite difficult because armed terrorist groups are there near, waiting for them, and military security forces also are there. And the risk is, when you are caught by armed terrorist group, you're going to be a good target. But when military see you and catch you, also you're going to be considered as an enemy of the nation. You might be tried. You're going to be persecuted. You're going to be sent to jail. This is quite problematic, and the situation is more or less the same when we go to Niger or a bit of Benin in the northern part of Benin, where, for example, going beyond Parakou, which is the northern part of Benin, the bigger city of Benin, is banned by the authorities on behalf of nothing. It's going to be the same as we go for Togo, and Chad is also quite.
Yes, I think if you look at the situation in the Sahel, Sadibou has pretty well summarized it. I think the independence of journalists is at risk because of those military takeovers by the government, in which journalists have been under pressure to report narratives of the conflict, but also about political situations, which doesn't contradict the established narrative of the government. We have seen that in Burkina Faso, where journalists such as Lamine Traoré and Ahmed Newton Barry have been intimidated online, but also offline, due to their reporting about the conflict, but also in Mali, where recently we have had cases of journalists, but also web activists being abducted by the intelligence services for days at times, subjected to ill treatment and torture. And this has led to this constitute a risk, a possibility of no-go zone in these countries, because due to the deteriorating conditions, journalists will be tempted to self-censor or even to leave these countries in order to protect their physical integrity.
What is so disturbing is that you excuse me, Sadibou, you say this with, it's so matter of fact. It's not some journalists, it's just journalists. The threats, the risks for journalists seem to be across the entire region. I want to give an example of Malik, who was reporting from Mali. He had to flee from Mali, and then he's now back in Mali talking about World Press Freedom Day from a position of experience. David, I want you to listen to Malik's experience and then tell us about how you have been in a situation where you were also very concerned about your safety. Here's Malik, first of all.
Même des agressions parfois, j'ai été victime.
I've been a victim of assault at my office at the end of July 2022. We brought forward complaints, we alerted the authorities, but nothing was done. In the face of this, to preserve our security, our integrity, we all decided to leave the country and go to a neighboring country to get shelter, be in security, to continue our jobs. Like I said, a journalist, a good journalist, is one that's alive with full liberty, the reason for which we decided to give ourselves that liberty and security to be able to continue to do our work.
David, I am just thinking here, the time when you were covering a story, when you were most afraid to be doing the story as an investigative journalist. What story was that?
Yes, so I work on so many topics concerning terrorism. For example, I did a cross-border topic on the border between Mali and Niger, Tillabéri region in Menaka. It was 2 years ago. It was many challenges. Firstly, to travel. You know, if you have to travel in the north of the country, like Menaka, you need to get ready for that. You need to manage everything, to be like a citizen there. You need to change your dress. You need to get right contacts on the ground, and you need to cover your head and to be able to look like people there. And this is the things you should do firstly before to leave. So I was working on the topic with my colleague Musa Aksar from Niger. So it was a very dangerous topics for us. So we was there to see how people are surviving against terrorism attacks, and how terrorism groups there are doing to keep people with them. You know, government are not there. So people think they are alone, and they don't have the support from government. So that's why they sometimes they manage to follow terrorism groups in the ground. So it is not easy. It wasn't easy for us to work on this topic. So, but everything was okay for us, and we was able to.
Reporting on terrorism is especially hard in Mali and in Burkina Faso. As you know, there have been military takeovers and by governments that have promised changes in the security landscape. And in this context, as David has pointed out, the situation in the Menaka region and Tillabéri is one where Islamic State in the Sahel is the predominant armed group and has launched an offensive since March 2022. And reporting about that situation is very much under the scrutiny of the government of Mali and also of the government of Burkina Faso. And I just want to remind you of the case of the journalist Olivier Dubois, who was just freed 2 months ago, I think, while he was abducted for almost 2 years, while he was doing a report on the spread of the group for the support of Islam and Muslims in the Gao region. So those are clear and present dangers faced by the journalists in that region.
I've got to bring in... yes, go ahead.
I wanted to highlight 2 things also in terms of kidnapping. Kidnapping is a risk for journalists. As Usman said, the case of Olivier Dubois, okay, but there are also actually in Mali 2 other cases, Moussa Manadiko and Amadou Nyalibouli also. They went missing since 2 years now, and the government, military juntas, they are doing nothing for them, and this is also absolutely awful for the journalists themselves And for their families, no one knows if they are still alive or if they have been killed. Everyone knows that. I mean, these people, these two journalists, they have been kidnapped by armed groups. But until now, there is no effort from the government. And the other thing is, when you are reporting while they are there ruling the countries, most of the time fighting back the armed terrorist group, they are also doing a lot of human rights violations, including killings of women, including killings of elderly people, including killing of everywhere. And then they don't want that to be covered, independently reported by the media. This is also one of the key problems the journalists are facing. They want all journalists, local and international, to be in accordance with the narrative themselves they want to sell to the world. This is not quite.
It's branding. It doesn't fit their brand for journalism to happen.
It doesn't fit. And just to add a quick point about this, in Mali and Burkina Faso, we have seen governments calling journalists, summoning them into the Ministry of Communications and exhorting them to a patriotic treatment of information. And that shows the kind of pressure that these journalists have faced.
If you don't write good stories about our country, then you're not truly patriotic, which is that's not journalism 101 at all. Gentlemen, let me just bring in, I know you know Olivier Dubois' story, but our audience may well be thinking, if this area is so dangerous, how on earth does a journalist get themselves into a situation where they are kidnapped? This is how Olivier Dubois explained what happened to him in Mali. Let's have a listen.
April
8th, 2021. I left Gao to do an interview with a group of militants, and I was kidnapped. I was freed 23 months later. The idea of interviewing these militants came about in November 2020. It took about 4 or 5 months until a letter of invitation sealed the deal. It made me go to Gao. Initially, it was out of the question for me to go to Gao. It had to be done over the phone. But he explained in one of his responses that he does not do interviews over the phone. He doesn't trust the phone. So if I wanted to interview him, I would have to go to Gao. And in the end, because I had assurances, because I trusted my fixer, my contact, I went to Gao and I was kidnapped.
What do journalists do about the dangers and the risks that they face? Let me start with Sadibou, because Reporters Without Frontiers, Without Borders, put out a report just recently about the Sahel region, the dangers, what the threats are, but also how you cope with that as a journalist. So what do you do?
We spoke during the preparation of the report in many countries in the Sahel with many journalists, including international journalists, including also some of their fixers, and they have been explaining, for example, some local journalists, I mean, for some safety and security reason, they were refraining from going outside of the capital city or in remote area for reporting, because, for example, if you in some countries, for example, like Burkina Faso, and we were told, and we were also shown that I think in the national ID card in some countries, I mean, the mention of a profession is not there, but in Burkina Faso, someone showed us his ID card. There is profession journalist, and if you are a profession as a profession of journalist, when you are in a bus traveling, for example, from the Soum province to the Sahel region, you might be stopped. The bus might be stopped for control by armed terrorist group who are alongside the road, and they enter the bus. They control who is who here. When they see you are the journalist, they say, okay, yes, get out of the bus and wait for us here, and the bus will go without you. I mean, these are some of the risky.
Sure.
Yes, and also what is also interesting is also the possibility for some of them to develop a kind of network of resilience. For example, covering the northern part is also developing some interesting strategy, for example, to develop some sources, local sources from the remote region. Those people, if WhatsApp or the social network are available, those people, if there is something, an attack, they can just they can just send the information in a very as a rush and then send it to another sources, who will send it to another sources, who will send it to another contact, and who will send it to a journalist
And speaking about the networks of resilience, Sadibou, I was just I wanted to point out also the fragility of the superior communications councils that exist in Mali and in Burkina Faso, and often that have been the actors summoning journalists and asking them about their editorial tone about the reporting.
Let me
I just want to give the case of of Malik Attaher Alidou of Attaher Alidou of Joliba TV in October, who was summoned by the Higher Communications Council in Mali and asked about his reporting on political transitions during his weekly show. And that is a problem because those actors should be the one protecting journalists and developing the networks of resilience, but not exposing them to the whims of the authorities.
What about, gentlemen, the perpetrators, the root causes of why journalism is so difficult, not just dangerous, but just very, very challenging? Earlier on, we spoke to a professor from Utrecht University. Have a listen to this, Sadibou, and then tell me, how do you get around these circumstances? The professor, first of all.
First of all, you've got a military government in Mali that is trying to paint a rosy picture about its operation since General Goïta came to power in 2021. Now, obviously, journalists who are opposed to this narrative or who are critical, they are targeted. And the last thing, of course, is also the work of the Russian paramilitary wing, the Wagner Group. This group has been accused also, especially among local journalists, of silencing dissent or journalists who are opposed to its operations.
How do you do journalism in a situation like this, Sadibou? I'm amazed that anybody is doing any stories, but that's the whole point, isn't it? It's a chilling effect.
It is a really chilling effect and a mix of danger from either from the authorities' side, the junta side, or from the other side, which is sometimes also the Wagner Group, which is prison in Mali and in some part, and from time to time in Burkina Faso. And about the Wagner groups, I mean, the thing is the narrative, the control of the narrative of the war, and also the development of a kind of anti-French speech. They are extremely very good and very, very powerful on that. Starting in Mali, for example, where from time to time you can see, a kind of ecosystem of people who are pro-junta and who are against French people, or who are also against journalists, French journalists who have been in Mali and who now have all been relocated from the country to another country, like in Dakar or like in Niger, for their safety. And this is also extremely important for their safety. They have no way to stay there for reporting.
Yes,
otherwise
I think one of the elements is that the Wagner groups and the new partnerships that have been developed by the Malian government includes a dimension about communications. So it's not only joint patrols by Wagner and the military in central Mali. It involves also developing communication strategies and campaigns. We have seen that being developed in Mali over the last year, but also like farm trolls being developed. Also Twitter campaigns that aims at disinformation in Mali and that targets sometimes journalists, sometimes French journalists, sometimes political authorities.
It's interesting because we've got connectivity issues with David and we've got light issues with Usman. These are everyday challenges that journalists across the African continent, they often have to face. But in the Sahel region, there's this added layer of difficulty. Why is it so important that journalists, organisations who support journalists, they really draw attention to why it's so difficult to report from the Sahel? This is Angela. She spoke to us a little bit earlier and she explains it in less than a minute. Here she is.
If you're kept in the dark and you're unable to make informed decisions based on accurate and credible information from a variety of sources, then you're more likely to be manipulated, to be fed propaganda and lies, especially by those who are hell-bent on staying in power and who want censorship. Look, it's really a case of you have the right to know and to have a mind of your own. And for that to be successful, a free, pluralistic and independent media is essential.
So much bigger than just trying to get the story out. There's an impact. Angela said, if you're kept in the dark, our man who was in the dark momentarily, Usman, pick up from Angela.
Yes, I think she has raised a very solid point about the right to information, which is actually at stake in Mali and in Burkina Faso. This is along freedom of expression and press freedom. The right to information of citizens is at stake currently due to the conflicting narratives about the trajectory of the transitions. If you look at, for example, the mass expulsions of heavily listened to and read French media houses such as Radio France Internationale and France 24, what was at stake was these media's independence about how they report about the conflict, which sometimes contradicted the government and which was not appreciated. I just want to give the example of the case of the Aribinda woman, 52 women that were abducted just outside of the town of Aribinda in Burkina Faso in January because they were collecting wild fruits because that city has been under siege by armed groups since last summer. And because France 24 talked about that situation and the fact that they were abducted by jihadists, what followed was the expulsion of the France 24 group from Burkina Faso because the government did not appreciate that narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just very quickly show our audience how France 24 responded to being pushed out of Burkina Faso because they're no longer able to be seen in Burkina Faso. Let me just show you very quickly. Let's play this, guys, because we don't have very much time left in our program. This is how France 24 responded to that pressure, in that they are doing journalism. They are not going to be pushed out. But this is, again, one of the dangers, the risks of doing journalism in an area that doesn't want you to do journalism at all. I'm going to go very quickly to YouTube, because on YouTube, we've had some thoughts from our audience, Sadibou, and just very quickly, one of our viewers is saying, this isn't a no-news zone, this is a secret zone. It's difficult to get information out. And then Brad, who's watching, had some suggestions for journalists about, well, maybe they need to protect themselves better. They should be equipped with body cameras. There's even suggesting stun guns at a minimum. But that means that your journalists are going to war in order just to tell news and tell the story. Sadibou, what would be the final thoughts for news organizations, journalists who are trying to get news out of the Sahel region, for how they take care of themselves and their colleagues?
We have advised and recommended in our report. We have done a lot of recommendations, and one of them, for example, towards the media organizations and media newsrooms, for example, if they want to they still have the right to go reporting, because that's not really banned, but it is because of the government are around and the security forces, they can't access. But in case they have the possibility, they should develop a protocol, set up safety and security protocol in the newsrooms. The journalists themselves, before going to report, they need to be very well equipped and very well prepared.
So
and we have also.
That's a good place to stop it, being very well equipped and very well prepared. We are more prepared, journalists are more prepared now from having heard this episode of The Stream. Sadibou, Usman, and David, who we had on earlier, thank you so much for being part of today's programme. May the 3rd is World Press Day. We wish all of the journalists around the world trying to tackle difficult stories every success. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.